The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across forward operating base Crimson, its golden rays filtering through the dust that seemed to hang permanently in the air of eastern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez knelt beside her Barrett M82A1, methodically working a cleaning rod through the massive rifle's barrel. The weapon stretched nearly 5 feet across the worn wooden table she'd commandeered in the armory's corner, its matte black finish absorbing the harsh fluorescent lighting overhead. Elena had claimed this particular corner months ago when she'd first arrived at Crimson. It was quiet here, away from the constant chatter and equipment noise that filled the main workshop areas. The other soldiers had learned to give her space during these sessions. They understood that when Staff Sergeant Vasquez was cleaning her rifle, interruptions were unwelcome. She pulled the cleaning rod free and held the barrel up to the light, squinting through it to check for any remaining fouling. Satisfied, she set the barrel aside and reached for the bolt assembly. Her movements were precise and economical, the product of thousands of repetitions. Each component received the same careful attention, the same methodical cleaning that had become as natural as breathing. The Barrett was more than just her primary weapon. It was her partner in a deadly dance that had played out across the mountains and valleys of Afghanistan for the better part of 2 years. Together, they had eliminated threats that ranged from Taliban commanders to IED emplacers, each shot carefully calculated and precisely executed. The rifle had never failed her, and she had never failed it. Elena's hands moved automatically as she worked, allowing her mind to drift to the mission from 3 days earlier. The target had been a high-value individual suspected of coordinating attacks on supply convoys traveling the main highway between Kabul and Kandahar. Intelligence had placed him in a compound approximately 2 kilometers from their observation post, a distance that most snipers would consider challenging at best. But Elena wasn't most snipers. The shot had required her to account for a 15-knot crosswind, a 20-degree temperature differential between her position and the target area, and the reduced air density caused by the compound's elevation advantage. She had spent 4 hours calculating variables, checking and rechecking her data, before taking the shot that eliminated the target with a single round to center mass. What made the shot remarkable wasn't just the distance or the environmental factors. It was the fact that Elena had made similar shots on 17 previous occasions, each one documented and verified by multiple observers. Her longest confirmed kill stood at 2,847 meters, a distance that put her in rarefied air among military snipers worldwide. The problem was that virtually nobody knew about it. Elena had requested on multiple occasions that her achievements be properly documented and submitted for recognition. Each time, her requests had been politely deflected by her immediate superiors. Staff Sergeant Vasquez was a valuable asset, they explained. But drawing attention to her capabilities might result in her being transferred to a different unit or location. Better to keep her accomplishments quiet and maintain operational security. She understood the logic, even if she didn't appreciate it. Special operations units were always protective of their best personnel, reluctant to share information that might result in those individuals being reassigned elsewhere. But Elena also understood that recognition wasn't just about personal pride. Documented achievements could open doors to advanced training opportunities, specialized assignments, and career advancement that would benefit both her and the military as a whole. The armory door opened with a squeak of hinges, admitting Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez. Elena glanced up from her work, noting the unusual expression on Miguel's face. He looked excited about something, which was unusual for a man who typically approached everything with methodical calm. "Elena, you need to clean up and report to the briefing room in 30 minutes, Miguel said, his voice carrying an undertone of barely contained enthusiasm. Elena set down the bolt carrier she'd been cleaning and looked at him more carefully. "What's going on, Miguel? We're not scheduled for any operations today." Miguel glanced around the armory, ensuring they were alone before stepping closer to Elena's work area. General Morrison is here for an inspection tour. Word is he's specifically requested to meet with you. Elena felt a cold sensation in her stomach. General Morrison was a two-star general responsible for special operations across the entire Afghan theater. His presence at Forward Operating Base Crimson was unusual enough, but a request to meet with an individual staff sergeant was unprecedented. "Did someone file a complaint?" Elena asked, running through recent missions in her mind. She couldn't think of anything that might have attracted negative attention from such a high-ranking officer. "No complaints," Miguel said, shaking his head. "Actually, I think it might be the opposite." Captain Henderson seemed pretty excited when he got the word. "Keep cleaning that Barrett, though. Apparently the general wants to see it." Elena felt her pulse quicken. If General Morrison wanted to see her rifle, it could only mean one thing. Someone had finally reported her shooting achievements up the chain of command. The question was whether this development would prove positive or negative for her career. She resumed cleaning the Barrett with renewed focus, each component receiving even more careful attention than usual. If a general was going to inspect her equipment, it would be in perfect condition. Elena had learned early in her military career that attention to detail in small matters often reflected on one's competence in larger ones. 25 minutes later, Elena stood in front of the armory's small mirror, checking her appearance one final time. Her ACU uniform was clean and properly fitted, her boots polished to a shine that reflected the overhead lights. The Barrett hung across her back on its tactical sling, its weight familiar and reassuring. Miguel appeared beside her in the mirror's reflection, offering an encouraging nod. "You look good, Elena. Just be yourself and answer his questions honestly. Whatever this is about, you've earned it." Elena managed a small smile in return. Miguel had been her spotter on many of the long-range shots that had built her reputation within their unit. If anyone understood what she was capable of, it was him. His confidence helped steady her nerves as she prepared to face whatever General Morrison had in mind. The walk to the briefing room felt longer than usual, despite taking the same route Elena had traversed hundreds of times during her deployment. Other soldiers she passed offered nods or brief greetings, but she noticed several looking at her with curiosity. Word had apparently spread that something unusual was happening. Captain Henderson waited outside the briefing room door, his expression unreadable. Elena had served under Henderson for 8 months and had developed a healthy respect for the man's tactical knowledge and leadership abilities. He was fair but demanding, supportive of his people while maintaining high standards for performance. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Henderson said as she approached. "The general is waiting inside. He's requested a private meeting with you and your rifle. I'll be present, but primarily as an observer." Elena nodded, adjusting the Barrett's position on her back. "Understood, sir. Should I be prepared for any specific topics or questions?" Henderson's expression softened slightly. "Elena, I want you to know that nothing about this meeting reflects negatively on you or your service. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Just be honest and direct with your answers. General Morrison appreciates straightforward communication." The briefing room was smaller than Elena had expected, containing only a rectangular table with chairs arranged around its perimeter. Maps of the local area covered one wall, marked with colored pins indicating various operational sites and areas of interest. General Morrison stood with his back to the door, studying one of these maps intently. Elena had seen pictures of General Morrison in briefings and official communications, but meeting him in person was different. He was shorter than she had expected, but carried himself with an unmistakable air of authority. His graying hair was cut in a precise military style, and his ACU uniform bore the ribbons and insignia that marked a career spanning multiple conflicts and decades of service. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez reporting as ordered, sir," Elena announced, coming to attention just inside the doorway. General Morrison turned from the map, his eyes immediately focusing on the Barrett rifle visible over Elena's shoulder. "At ease, Staff Sergeant. Please take a seat and make yourself comfortable." Elena moved to a chair facing the general, unsure whether she should remove the rifle or leave it positioned as it was. General Morrison seemed to sense her uncertainty. "I'd like to take a look at that Barrett if you don't mind," he said, his tone conversational rather than commanding. "I understand you've achieved some remarkable results with it." Elena stood and carefully removed the rifle from her shoulder, placing it on the table between herself and the general. Morrison moved closer, his hands clasped behind his back as he examined the weapon without touching it. "This is the M82A1 variant," Morrison observed. "50 caliber semi-automatic. Effective range out to approximately 1,800 meters for most shooters." He paused, looking directly at Elena. "But you're not most shooters, are you, Staff Sergeant?" "No, sir," Elena replied simply. There was no point in false modesty when discussing documented facts. General Morrison nodded approvingly. "Captain Henderson has shared some interesting information about your shooting achievements. 17 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, with your longest recorded at 2,247 meters. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir. All shots were observed and verified according to standard protocols." Morrison walked slowly around the table, his attention alternating between Elena and the rifle. "Do you know why I'm here today, Staff Sergeant?" "No, sir." "I'm here because someone in the Pentagon became curious about why our after-action reports from this region consistently show enemy casualties at ranges that seem impossible according to conventional wisdom. When they investigated further, your name kept appearing in the details." Elena felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression neutral. She had always known that her shooting would eventually attract attention from higher levels of command. The question was what form that attention would take. "The Army is currently evaluating our sniper training programs and operational capabilities," Morrison continued. "We're particularly interested in individuals who have demonstrated exceptional performance under combat conditions. Your record suggests capabilities that could prove valuable in several different contexts." Morrison returned to his original position across from Elena, his hands resting on the table's surface. "I'd like you to tell me about the shot you took 3 days ago. Walk me through your process from target identification to engagement." Elena took a breath, organizing her thoughts before responding. This was her opportunity to demonstrate not just her shooting ability, but her understanding of the complex factors that contributed to successful long-range engagements. "The target was identified at approximately 0930 hours, she began. "Intelligence indicated he would be present at the compound for a limited time window, so we had to establish our position quickly while maintaining concealment from potential observers." She continued for the next 20 minutes, detailing every aspect of the mission from initial reconnaissance to post-engagement extraction. Morrison listened intently, occasionally asking questions about specific calculations or environmental factors. His questions demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of long-range shooting that surprised Elena. "You calculated the ballistic solution entirely in your head?" Morrison asked when Elena finished her account. "Yes, sir. I have ballistic software available, but field conditions don't always allow time for electronic calculations. I've memorized the ballistic characteristics of my specific rifle and ammunition combination." Morrison exchanged a meaningful glance with Captain Henderson before returning his attention to Elena. "Staff Sergeant, how would you feel about a change of assignment? Something that would allow you to utilize your capabilities more fully while contributing to the development of improved training programs." Elena hesitated, uncertain how to respond. Change of assignment could mean many things, from advanced training opportunities to transfers that might take her away from the combat role she had worked so hard to achieve. "I would need more information about the specific assignment, sir," she said carefully. "My primary concern is continuing to serve in a capacity where I can make meaningful contributions to mission success." General Morrison smiled for the first time since the meeting had begun. I think you'll find the opportunities I have in mind very much aligned with that goal, Staff Sergeant. But we'll discuss the details tomorrow. For now, I'd like you to prepare a detailed written account of your shooting techniques and field calculation methods. Someone from my staff will collect it in the morning. Elena felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as the implications of Morrison's words sank in. Tomorrow would bring changes that could reshape her entire military career. The question was whether those changes would take her closer to or further from the combat operations that had defined her service. As the general prepared to leave, he paused beside the Barrett rifle, studying the small notches carved into its stock. Each notch represented a confirmed kill, a life taken in service to mission objectives and the protection of fellow soldiers. "Impressive work, Staff Sergeant," Morrison said quietly. "I look forward to our conversation tomorrow." Elena spent the night hunched over a laptop in the communications tent, carefully documenting her shooting methodology and field calculation techniques. The words came slowly at first, as she struggled to translate instinctive knowledge into clear, instructional language. How do you explain the subtle feel of wind patterns against your cheek that helps refine ballistic calculations? How do you describe the mental process of instantly converting range estimates into precise elevation adjustments? By Aero 500 hours, she had produced 12 pages of detailed technical information, covering everything from equipment preparation to environmental assessment procedures. The document represented years of hard-won experience distilled into a format that could potentially help train the next generation of military snipers. Elena printed 3 copies of her report, sealed them in manila envelopes, and prepared for another meeting that could reshape her future. Captain Henderson had scheduled a Yo-800 briefing with General Morrison, this time in the base commander's conference room rather than the small briefing area where they'd met the previous day. The conference room was larger and more formal, with a polished wooden table surrounded by high-backed chairs. Maps covered the walls, but these showed a much broader geographic area than the tactical maps Elena was accustomed to studying. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, and several African countries were marked with various symbols and notations that suggested ongoing or planned operations. General Morrison arrived precisely at 800, accompanied by a lieutenant colonel Elena didn't recognize. The lieutenant colonel was younger than Morrison, probably in his early 40s, with the lean build and alert bearing that suggested special operations background. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Colonel James Reeder," Morrison said as they took their seats. "Colonel Reeder heads our Advanced Marksmanship Development Program at Fort Benning." Elena stood and shook hands with Reeder, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact that marked a man accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. "Staff Sergeant, I've reviewed your performance records with considerable interest," Reeder said. "Your consistency at extended ranges is remarkable, particularly considering the variety of environmental conditions you've encountered." "Thank you, sir," Elena replied, uncertain where the conversation was heading. General Morrison leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. "Elena, what I'm about to discuss with you is classified at the secret level. Do you understand the implications of that classification?" "Yes, sir." "Good. The Army is implementing significant changes to our sniper training programs based on lessons learned from operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've identified a need for instructors who combine exceptional shooting skills with actual combat experience. Your record suggests you would be an ideal candidate for such a position." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Instructor positions were typically seen as career advancement opportunities, but they also meant leaving combat operations behind. The prospect was both exciting and concerning. Lieutenant Colonel Reeder opened a folder and removed several photographs, spreading them across the table. The images showed various training facilities, indoor and outdoor ranges, and classroom environments that looked far more sophisticated than anything Elena had seen in her military career. The Advanced Marksmanship Development Program operates from a new facility at Fort Benning, Reeder explained. We train military snipers, law enforcement marksmen, and selected personnel from allied nations. Our mission is to develop and refine shooting techniques that push the boundaries of what's considered possible. One photograph showed a massive outdoor range with targets positioned at distances that stretched beyond Elena's line of sight. Another depicted an indoor ballistics laboratory filled with electronic equipment she didn't recognize. We're particularly interested in your field calculation methods, Morrison added. Most snipers rely heavily on electronic ballistic computers or prepared data cards. Your ability to generate accurate solutions mentally gives you a significant advantage in rapidly changing tactical situations. Elena studied the photographs, trying to process the implications of what she was hearing. Sir, what would my specific role be in this program? Primary instructor for advanced long-range techniques, Reeder replied without hesitation. You would be responsible for developing curriculum, training students, and conducting research into improved methodologies. Additionally, you would serve as a test shooter for experimental equipment and ammunition. The opportunity was impressive, but Elena had learned to ask detailed questions before making commitments. Would this assignment preclude future combat deployments? Morrison and Reeder exchanged glances before Morrison responded. Elena, I'm going to be direct with you. Your shooting abilities have reached a level where your value as an instructor exceeds your value as a field operator. We can replace combat snipers, but we cannot easily replace someone with your combination of skills and experience. The statement hit Elena like a physical blow. She understood the logic, but accepting it meant acknowledging that her days of direct combat engagement were essentially over. However, Reeder continued, the position includes opportunities for field testing and evaluation missions. You wouldn't be permanently relegated to classroom instruction. Some of our research requires real-world validation under combat conditions. Elena felt some of her disappointment ease. The prospect of continuing operational involvement, even in a limited capacity, made the instructor position more appealing. There's another aspect to this assignment we haven't discussed, Morrison said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Part of your role would involve developing countermeasures against long-range shooting threats. Not all precision marksmen work for friendly forces. The implication was clear. Elena would be responsible for training soldiers to defend against snipers like herself, a responsibility that carried significant weight. I'd like to see the facility before making a decision, Elena said, and I'd want to understand the specific expectations for the position in more detail. Of course, Reeder replied. We've arranged for you to visit Fort Benning next month for a comprehensive orientation. You'll tour the facilities, observe current training programs, and meet the personnel you'd be working with. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying Elena's expression. Staff Sergeant, I want you to understand something important. This opportunity represents recognition for achievements that many people will never know about. Your combat record will remain classified, but within the special operations community, your capabilities are becoming legendary. Elena felt a mix of pride and frustration at Morrison's words. She had joined the military to serve her country and protect fellow soldiers, not to become legendary. But she also understood that recognition, even limited recognition, could enable her to make larger contributions to mission success. There's one more thing, Morrison continued. This position comes with a promotion to Sergeant First Class, effective immediately if you accept. Additionally, successful completion of the instructor course qualifies you for advancement to the Warrant Officer program. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. Warrant officer positions were highly competitive and typically reserved for soldiers with exceptional technical expertise. The promotion opportunity represented a significant career advancement that would provide increased responsibility and compensation. I'll need some time to consider the offer, Elena said. When do you need a decision? 2 weeks. Morrison replied. That will give you time to complete your current deployment obligations and arrange for the facility visit. Lieutenant Colonel Reeder gathered the photographs and returned them to his folder. Elena, I'd like to ask you about something specific. Have you ever encountered shooting situations where standard ballistic solutions proved inadequate? Elena considered the question carefully. Yes, sir. Several times in mountainous terrain where air density variations created unexpected trajectory changes. Also, situations involving targets at significantly different elevations where standard elevation adjustments proved insufficient. Reeder nodded with obvious interest. Those are exactly the types of challenges we're trying to address through advanced training programs. Your experience with non-standard scenarios would be invaluable in curriculum development. The meeting continued for another hour, with Morrison and Reeder providing increasingly detailed information about the instructor position and its requirements. Elena asked pointed questions about training schedules, operational tempo, and opportunities for continued skill development. Both officers answered her questions thoroughly and honestly, which increased her confidence in their integrity. As the meeting concluded, Elena found herself genuinely excited about the possibilities the position offered. Teaching others to achieve precision shooting excellence appealed to her on multiple levels. It would allow her to share knowledge gained through years of combat experience while contributing to the development of improved training methods. One final question, sir, Elena said as they prepared to leave. Would I be able to bring my current rifle to the new assignment? Morrison smiled. Elena, that Barrett will be transferred with you. It's essentially a custom weapon now, configured specifically for your shooting style and preferences. We wouldn't dream of separating you from it. Elena felt a wave of relief. The Barrett had been her constant companion through countless missions and represented far more than just a piece of equipment. Knowing she could continue working with the familiar rifle made the transition seem less dramatic. After Morrison and Reeder departed, Elena remained in the conference room for several minutes, processing everything she had learned. The instructor position represented an opportunity to make a broader impact on military operations while advancing her own career in meaningful ways. Captain Henderson appeared in the doorway, his expression curious but supportive. How did it go, Elena? Better than I expected, sir. They're offering me an instructor position at Fort Benning with immediate promotion to Sergeant First Class. Henderson's face lit up with genuine pleasure. Elena, that's outstanding news. You've earned this opportunity through exceptional performance and dedication. Elena nodded, though her emotions remained mixed. It means leaving combat operations, sir. That's not an easy decision. Henderson moved into the room and closed the door behind him. Elena, can I speak to you frankly? Of course, sir. You've achieved things in this deployment that most snipers can only dream about. Your shooting record speaks for itself, but more importantly, you've consistently demonstrated the judgment and professionalism that define outstanding soldiers. This instructor position will allow you to multiply your impact by training others to achieve similar levels of excellence. Elena appreciated Henderson's perspective, but part of her still resisted the idea of leaving active combat operations. What if I'm more effective in the field than in a classroom? Elena, you've already proven your effectiveness in the field. The question now is whether you're ready to prove your effectiveness as a leader and teacher. From what I've observed, you have the knowledge, patience, and communication skills necessary to excel in both roles. Henderson's words carried particular weight because Elena respected his judgment and valued his opinion. If he believed she was ready for the increased responsibility, perhaps her own doubts were unfounded. There's something else to consider, Henderson continued. The Army is changing, and soldiers who can adapt to new roles and responsibilities will have the most successful careers. This instructor position positions you for continued advancement in ways that field operations alone cannot. Elena spent the remainder of the day thinking about the conversation and the opportunities it represented. She walked the perimeter of forward operating base Crimson, observing the landscape that had become familiar over months of operations. The mountains in the distance held memories of successful missions and challenging shots, each one contributing to the reputation that had brought General Morrison to her attention. That evening, Elena called her parents from the communications tent, sharing news of the promotion opportunity without discussing the classified aspects of her current assignment. Their pride and excitement helped reinforce her growing sense that accepting the instructor position was the right decision. By the time she returned to her quarters, Elena had reached a conclusion. The instructor position offered opportunities for growth and impact that exceeded anything she could achieve by remaining in field operations. More importantly, it represented a chance to help other soldiers develop the skills necessary to protect themselves and their units in combat situations. She would accept General Morrison's offer and begin preparing for the next phase of her military career. The Barrett would accompany her to Fort Benning, where together they would help train the next generation of military marksmen to achieve excellence at impossible distances. Elena smiled as she thought about the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Tomorrow, she would inform Captain Henderson of her decision and begin the process of transitioning to her new assignment. The journey from forward operating base Crimson to Fort Benning would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another in a career that had already exceeded her highest expectations. 3 months later, Sergeant First Class Elena Vasquez stood at the edge of the most sophisticated shooting range she had ever seen. The Advanced Marksmanship Development Program facility at Fort Benning stretched across nearly 2,000 acres of carefully maintained Georgia countryside. Targets were positioned at distances ranging from 800 meters to over 3,000 meters, each one equipped with electronic scoring systems that could detect and record bullet impacts with millimeter accuracy. Elena adjusted the familiar weight of the Barrett across her shoulder and surveyed the range where she would demonstrate long-range shooting techniques to a class of 12 experienced snipers. These weren't new recruits learning basic marksmanship. Each student had completed standard sniper school and accumulated significant field experience. They were here to learn advanced techniques that would push their capabilities beyond conventional limits. The transition from combat operations to instructor duties had proven more challenging than Elena had anticipated. Teaching required a completely different skill set from field operations, demanding patience, clear communication, and the ability to break down instinctive knowledge into digestible steps. During her first month at Fort Benning, Elena had struggled to translate years of combat experience into effective classroom instruction. Lieutenant Colonel Reeder had been supportive but direct in his feedback. Elena's technical knowledge was exceptional, but her teaching methods needed refinement. She tended to move too quickly through complex concepts, assuming her students could follow logical progressions that seemed obvious to her, but proved difficult for others to grasp. The breakthrough had come during a one-on-one session with Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, a Marine sniper with 3 combat deployments who was struggling with Elena's field calculation methods. Instead of walking through mathematical formulas, Elena had taken Thompson to the range and demonstrated her mental process while actually engaging targets. "Don't think about the math," Elena had told him as they prepared for a shot at 2,200 meters. "Think about the story the environment is telling you. The wind isn't just speed and direction. It's temperature and humidity and pressure changes. The target isn't just distance and elevation. It's light conditions and background contrast and movement patterns." Thompson had made the connection immediately. Within 2 weeks, he was successfully engaging targets at ranges that had previously been beyond his capabilities. More importantly, he was able to explain his improved understanding to other students, helping Elena develop more effective teaching techniques. Now, 6 weeks into her instructor assignment, Elena had found her rhythm. She combined technical instruction with practical demonstration, theoretical knowledge with field experience, individual coaching with group learning. Her students' performance improvements validated her teaching methods and boosted her confidence in her new role. "Sergeant First Class Vasquez, are you ready to begin the demonstration?" asked Captain Lisa Chen, the Advanced Marksmanship Program's academic coordinator. Elena nodded, checking the Barrett's configuration one final time. Today's lesson focused on extreme long-range shooting in variable wind conditions. She had spent the morning preparing specific scenarios designed to challenge her students' understanding of ballistic calculation and environmental assessment. The 12 students gathered around Elena as she positioned herself at the firing line. Their faces showed a mixture of anticipation and skepticism. They had heard about Elena's combat record, but classroom reputation was different from witnessed performance. Today would determine whether their new instructor could deliver on the promises made by program administrators. "Before we begin shooting, I want everyone to study the conditions and calculate a ballistic solution for the target at 2,400 meters, Elena announced. "Take your time and use whatever methods you prefer. We'll compare your solutions before I demonstrate the engagement." Elena watched her students work, noting their different approaches to the problem. Some relied heavily on electronic ballistic computers, entering environmental data and receiving precise firing solutions. Others used prepared data cards, interpolating between known values to estimate the required adjustments. A few attempted mental calculations, though their uncertainty was obvious. After 15 minutes, Elena collected their solutions and wrote them on a whiteboard visible to the entire class. The results varied significantly, with elevation adjustments ranging from 32 to 47 clicks and windage corrections from 8 to 15 clicks left. "Interesting spread," Elena observed. "Can anyone explain why we're seeing such different solutions for identical conditions?" Staff Sergeant Thompson raised his hand. "Different assumptions about environmental factors, ma'am. Some people are probably using standard atmospheric pressure while others are using actual barometric readings." "Good. What else?" "Ammunition temperature," suggested Sergeant Angela Martinez, an Army sniper with experience in both Iraq and Afghanistan. "If we're using different temperature assumptions, that will affect muzzle velocity and trajectory." Elena nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Both factors are critical for accurate long-range calculations. Now let me show you my approach." Elena positioned herself behind the Barrett, adjusting the bipod legs and checking the rifle's natural point of aim. Instead of immediately calculating a firing solution, she spent several minutes studying the environment through her scope, observing wind patterns at various distances between her position and the target. "I can see dust patterns indicating a left-to-right crosswind of approximately 12 knots at 800 meters, she announced. "But notice the vegetation movement at 1,500 meters suggests the wind shifts to right to left at approximately 8 knots. The target area shows minimal wind indicators, suggesting relatively calm conditions in the final 600 meters. Elena continued her environmental assessment, describing subtle indicators that her students struggled to detect even with her guidance. Wind patterns revealed by dust movement, mirage effects that indicated temperature gradients, and atmospheric pressure changes suggested by cloud formations all contributed to her ballistic calculations. Based on these observations, "I'm setting elevation at 38.5 clicks up and windage at 6 clicks left," Elena announced. "The complex wind pattern requires holding for approximately half the total crosswind value, compensated for the reduced effect in the final portion of the bullet's flight path." Elena settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and allowing her heart rate to stabilize. The Barrett's recoil pad pressed firmly against her shoulder as she aligned the crosshairs on the target's center mass. Her finger found the trigger's second stage, applying smooth, straight-back pressure until the rifle fired. The massive rifle's recoil drove Elena backward, but she recovered quickly and observed the target through her scope. a perfect center hit, confirmed moments later by the electronic scoring system's display. "Outstanding shot, Sergeant First Class," Captain Chen observed. "Would you like to explain your correction process?" Elena stood and faced her students, noting their expressions of impressed respect. "The key is understanding that long-range shooting isn't about memorizing formulas or relying exclusively on technology. It's about reading the environment accurately and trusting your observations." She spent the next hour walking each student through the environmental assessment process, helping them identify the subtle indicators she had used to calculate her firing solution. Some students grasped the concepts quickly, while others required additional explanation and practice. Sergeant Martinez proved particularly adept at reading wind patterns, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of how different terrain features affected air movement. Staff Sergeant Thompson excelled at temperature and pressure assessment, drawing on his experience operating in diverse climatic conditions. "Now, I want each of you to engage the same target using your own calculated solution," Elena announced. "Don't adjust based on my demonstration. Trust your own assessment and see what results you achieve." The results were educational for everyone involved. 3 students achieved hits within 6 inches of the target center, demonstrating solid fundamental skills and accurate environmental assessment. 4 students missed by margins ranging from 12 to 18 inches, indicating calculation errors or environmental misreading. The remaining 5 students missed the target entirely, revealing significant gaps in their long-range shooting capabilities. Elena used each result as a teaching opportunity, helping students understand where their calculations had proven accurate or inadequate. She emphasized that missed shots provided valuable learning experiences, often revealing more about shooting fundamentals than successful hits. "Sergeant First Class, could you demonstrate one more engagement?" asked Staff Sergeant David Kim, a special operations sniper whose shot had impacted 2 feet low and 8 inches left of the target center. "I think I misread the wind in the middle section of the range." Elena nodded and returned to the firing line. This time, she engaged a target at 2,800 meters, walking her students through an even more complex environmental assessment. The increased distance amplified every environmental factor, making accurate calculation significantly more challenging. Her shot resulted in another center hit, prompting spontaneous applause from her students. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction that reminded her of successful combat missions, though the stakes were obviously different. "The principles remain the same regardless of distance," Elena explained as her students gathered around her. "Accurate environmental assessment, precise calculation, and consistent shooting fundamentals will produce predictable results at any range." After the range session concluded, Elena found herself in Lieutenant Colonel Reeder's office for their weekly progress review. These meetings had become increasingly positive as Elena's teaching effectiveness improved and her students' performance demonstrated measurable advancement. "Elena, I've been reviewing your students' scores from this week's evaluations," Reeder said, consulting a folder of performance records. "Average improvement across all metrics exceeds 20% compared to their baseline assessments. That's exceptional progress." Elena felt genuine pride in her students' achievements. "They're motivated learners, sir. Once they understand the underlying principles, they make rapid improvements. I've received several requests from other training programs asking about your methods," Reeder continued. "The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School wants to send a delegation to observe your environmental assessment curriculum. Special Operations Command has inquired about having you conduct advanced training for their personnel." The recognition was gratifying, but Elena remained focused on her current responsibilities. "Sir, I'm still developing my teaching methods. I'd prefer to gain more experience with our existing program before taking on additional responsibilities." Reeder nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of measured response I hope to hear. However, I do want you to start thinking about curriculum expansion. We're planning to add a specialized course for law enforcement marksmen who might encounter long-range scenarios. Elena had not previously considered applying her military experience to law enforcement training, but the concept intrigued her. Police marksmen faced different challenges from military snipers, but many of the fundamental principles would translate effectively. That would be an interesting challenge, sir. Law enforcement scenarios involve different legal and tactical considerations. Exactly. Which is why we need instructors who understand the underlying ballistic and environmental principles rather than just military-specific applications. That evening, Elena returned to her quarters and cleaned the Barrett with the same methodical care she had always applied to the task. The rifle had performed flawlessly during the day's demonstrations, maintaining the reliability and accuracy that had made it such an effective combat tool. As she worked, Elena reflected on the unexpected direction her career had taken. 6 months ago, she had been focused solely on combat operations and tactical missions. Now, she was responsible for training others to achieve excellence in precision shooting, contributing to military readiness in ways she had never previously considered. The transition had not always been easy, but Elena had discovered genuine satisfaction in teaching. Watching her students develop new capabilities and confidence provided rewards different from but equally meaningful as successful combat missions. She was making a lasting impact on military effectiveness by sharing knowledge gained through years of field experience. Elena's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her parents' number, and she answered with genuine pleasure. "Hi, Mom. How are you doing?" "Elena, sweetheart, we're doing wonderful. Your father wants to know when we can visit you at your new assignment. He's very proud of your promotion and wants to see where you're working." Elena smiled, considering the logistics of arranging a visit to Fort Benning. "I think I can arrange something next month. There are some restrictions on which areas you can visit, but I can definitely show you around the general facilities." "That would be wonderful, dear. We've been telling everyone about your promotion to Sergeant First Class. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door said her nephew is thinking about joining the Army. She wanted to know if you could talk to him about military opportunities." The request reminded Elena of the broader impact her teaching role could have. Military service offered young people opportunities for personal development and meaningful careers. But many potential recruits lacked accurate information about available specialties and advancement possibilities. "I'd be happy to talk to him, Mom. Have Mrs. Rodriguez give you his contact information, and I'll call him when I get a chance." After ending the call, Elena completed her rifle cleaning and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring another day of teaching and learning, another opportunity to help students develop capabilities they had not known they possessed. As she drifted toward sleep, Elena thought about the impossible distance marks that General Morrison had noticed on her military record. Those achievements had opened doors to opportunities she could never have imagined when she first enlisted. The Barrett beside her bed bore witness to a journey that had taken her from basic training to combat operations to advanced instruction. The impossible distances were behind her now, recorded in classified files and remembered by fellow soldiers who had witnessed her achievements. But new impossibilities lay ahead, challenges that would test her abilities as a teacher and leader rather than as a shooter. Elena was ready to face those challenges with the same determination and excellence that had defined her career from the beginning. In the morning, she would return to the range with a new group of students, each one seeking to push beyond conventional limits and achieve their own impossible distances. Elena would guide them through that journey, sharing the knowledge and experience that had made her own extraordinary achievements possible. The Barrett would be ready, as it always was, clean and precise and perfectly maintained. Together, they would continue serving their country in ways that honored the past while preparing for an uncertain future.